So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I see our attendees kind of plateauing here. So welcome everyone to our webinar series, Envisioning Equitable and Sustainable Housing. Today is part 2 of the 3-part series this month. Last week, we had a great webinar focusing on a framework for how equity, environment, sustainability, resilience, and housing all intersect with communities on the ground. And today we will be focusing on some local projects that are facing, environmental challenges and how they have or currently are facing them while redeveloping the land and involving the communities. My name is Erica Rossetti. I'm the Urban Waters Coordinator with the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. I'll be moderating today's webinar and managing the Q&A along with my wonderful colleague, Roberto Fragoni, who's with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items. Again, you'll notice that all participants today are automatically muted with your video turned off, so you should only be able to see the speakers today. Second, if you have any questions, please go ahead and use that Q&A feature. Should be on the bottom tab of your Zoom screen. Again, Roberto and I will be moderating the Q&A. We'll have time at the end of all the presentations to have a Q&A session. The chat will also remain open. You can chat with the moderators and presenters or with each other for networking. We do just ask that if you have a question, you can put it in the Q&A feature. And finally, as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded today, so we will share a recording with everyone after. And before I do another brief introduction, I'm going to go ahead and start this poll and just leave it open for a couple of minutes so that all of our attendees can fill it out so our speakers have a good idea of who's in the room by sector and by geography. And make sure that we're really connecting with everyone. So you should be able to see that. There we go. And just as a reminder, this webinar today is being brought to you by the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, as well as the Urban Waters Federal Partnership. I talked about this in our first webinar, so I won't go into too much detail today. You can watch the recording from last week if you'd like. But the Urban Waters Federal Partnership, just to review, is an EPA environmental justice program that focuses on environmental justice and water equity projects connecting communities with their waterways, specifically those that are historically and economically disconnected. There are other resources available through Urban Waters that I can put the links for in the chat as well. And we are one of 20 locations in the Urban Waters Federal Partnership. So just as a reminder, the Delaware River location is its own Urban Waters location, and we focus on the lower section of the Delaware River. So you can see here, mostly these 4 cities are Camden, New Jersey, Chester, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Wilmington, Delaware. And you can see just by the population sizes, I didn't put demographics there, but you can see that these cities do vary in size and structure, but they do face a lot of similar issues. And today I'm very excited to introduce some speakers who will be talking about local projects in our urban areas, focusing on the environment and redevelopment and how they're, doing these projects equitably and sustainably. So first up, we'll have Brett Sadler with the Claymont Renaissance Development Corporation. They are proposing, I believe, a riverfront park project. Second, we will hear from Frank Mclaughlin from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Frank is one of our Urban Waters partners as well. They have been doing a lot of work building community and doing a waterfront park project in Camden, New Jersey. And finally, we'll hear from Bart Wilson. from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who has been helping do a habitat restoration near the Eastwick community in Southwest Philadelphia, and John Hines National Wildlife Refuge. They've been experiencing a lot of flooding in those communities, especially recently due to climate change. So before I pass it over to Brett, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and stop this poll so we can see who's in the room with us today. So it looks like we have a little bit of a mix today, pretty spread evenly between federal, state and local governments, nonprofits, education, and general community members. So thanks everyone for joining us from all over today. And 85% of our attendees are calling in from the Delaware River location, but we do have a couple people calling in from the Northeast, Southeast, and other Mid-Atlantic states. So it looks like we have a good mix today, and I'm going to now pass it off to Brett with the Claymont Renaissance Development Corporation.
Hey everybody, how are we doing? I'm really excited to be here today to talk about this project, both the park and a little bit about the redevelopment of the old Claymont steel mill. It's a huge project for Delaware. Remember, Delaware's a tiny place, but the Claymont steel project is 425 acres. That's a big chunk of land for Delaware. So we're excited about being a part of that. And I asked the attendees to bear with me. I'm up against Frank and Bart, and they know this stuff probably a lot better than I do. I'm the economic development guy as opposed to the natural resources guy. So I will do my best to talk about things that are of interest and concern with this group. That said, I'm going to open up my PowerPoint. I'm doing a screen share, and there we go. Share. All right, I guess everybody can see it. Okay. Okay, start out with a few basics. All right, so you all heard of Claymont before. This is probably why I have to bring up this guy. We joke that Claymont is the real Scranton, but this is where the president grew up, and he mentions it a lot in his speeches over the years. So except we tore down his boyhood home to redevelop it. So I'm not sure, he never said how he feels about that, but it was a necessary evil. So where are we? Delaware. Most of you probably know, but just in case. So we're up here in Center City, obviously the river, Wilmington. Claymont is bordered by the Pennsylvania state line and the Delaware River. And actually from a few yards from my house, I can see both Pennsylvania and New Jersey at the same time, almost like I can see Russia from my house. So we are in a neat area, and we are the only area in Delaware, I believe, that, and I see this quite often on my way to my office, is I can see on a nice clear day in the morning, Center City, Philadelphia. So that's sort of neat. So we're not that far away. Okay, so the local area, zooming in, just to give everybody a bearing. Over here is Pennsylvania. We are in, this far northern corner. And the area that we're going to be focusing on is right here, the old steel mill area. Now I want to just show when we're talking about environmental equity issues. If you know this area, let me try my pen thing. Let's see if I can get that to work. All right, so this is a very industrial area up here. So right across the state line, you have Marcus Hook Claymont Industrial Complex, the old Sunoco refinery. You have it basically goes all the way up into Trainer and to south of Chester. So we are definitely fence line communities for industry, and those industry help build, along with the steel mill that was in this area here, help build the working class in Claymont. That said, we do have some challenged neighborhoods close by. And it's funny that all three of them were built pre-World War I as workers' housing. We have this area right up here for the National Aniline Chemicals, whatever aniline is. But they are long gone. But there's workers' housing here. We have the Knollwood community that was cut off by 95 from the rest of Claymont. That was for the steel mill. And down here, we have the Overlook Colony community, which was built for the General Chemical plant that was up here. So all these are challenged neighborhoods. We're making some great progress with this. So I just want to give you a little bit of a bearing here. Of course, this is 95 going through. And by the way, all of you, I bet every one of you who's here today has been to Claymont. When you cross into Delaware, you either stay on 95, go through the center of Wilmington, or most likely if you're going to Baltimore or DC, you get on 495, bypass Wilmington and run down by the river. So next time you're driving through, please wave. Okay, so this is the concept plan for the redevelopment steel mill. Now I needed to break this into two slides, north of the train tracks, north of Amtrak, and south of Amtrak. So it is a mixed use development. I say it is a big area. It's 425 acres there's some warehousing, light industrial over here, a hotel there, retail over there, office. This is all residential, and this is our new train station that is currently being built. Now you go on the south side of the train tracks. You have apartments, residential, quite a bit of residential, and of course the river. Now this is the area where we're looking to do the park. Now this is the developer's initial plans for this area, and the developer wants to donate 125 acres for this park. So this is most likely going to be changing a bit from the final product. So, but it gives you an idea of where we are. Okay, so this is Claymont Steel, 1927. Needless to say, there is an industrial legacy there going way back. Now, one might think that this place is so toxic, how would anybody want to develop homes in a park on there? You can see getting away with, office or in light industrial. Well, being that it was a steel mill, the worst contaminants on the site are like some heavy metals, as opposed to a chemical plant that is much, much worse. I know we're working on redeveloping the General Chemical site, which was up here, and there's some nasties there. Nobody will ever be living on the General Chemical site, that is for sure. But down here, the issues can be mitigated through the normal brownfield process. So, reason for the park, we want our river back. And I took this photo. We have a beach. All right, granted, not a beach that you want to lay a towel on and walk around in flip-flops, but it is a beach. It's just a beautiful amenity down there. And this is just a start, but we want to connect Claymont to itself. Claymont over from the 19th century, before 19th century, up till the early 20th century, utilized its waterfront. With the additional train traffic and especially with the building of 495 along the river, we lost that access. So let's get some of that access back somehow. So the origin of the idea, of course, I mentioned the historic use of the river. The early what ifs years ago, wouldn't that be great if we could somehow, but of course we had a steel mill, chugging along. Well, the steel mill closed. And right then and there, we realized that we needed to come up with, in case there was an interested buyer of it and was not going to be a steel mill, we needed to come up with a planning process. Fortunately, in 2015, the mill was bought by a commercial CDC, a commercial development corp out in St. Louis, with the goal of redeveloping that site. And we really liked what they were saying for the redevelopment. And a lot of sites like this could sit fallow for decades before they possibly get redeveloped. And so they've been a great partner to work with. And we came through, we worked with all the partners down here of our NPO, which is called WMAPCO, state and county organizations, and even working with some folks with in the environmental and government offices. So we came up with the North Claymont Area Master Plan, which Newcastle County is about to be ensconcing into the our Uniform Development Code for Newcastle County. So it gives special design criteria and investment bonuses and things like that for this area. And then 125 acres that were offered to be donated by the owner for a park. Now, this is not unique for a developer to want to donate land to government. Just to let everybody know, because for a developer, it's like, sure, I'd love the state to come in, the county come in to do a park on my property. It makes the value of my property better. And it happens more often than you think. And especially since it's unbuildable, it's really unbuildable, developable part of their land. It's a great thing, but we sort of have to deal with a jaded government saying, well, this happens all the time. We had to explain why this is a unique opportunity. So, okay, making of the concept plan. To get this going, to take this to the powers that be, it can't just be us running into a elected official or somebody in a corridor somewhere or at a meeting and talking about this grand idea and try to explain it. We need to have a concept. We need to have maps. We need to have pictures, more than just a verbal idea. So we were incredibly fortunate to be able to have the University of Delaware's Coastal Design Resiliency Studio become involved. Now they're funded by University of Delaware and Delaware Sea Grant, but they work with UAD students and other students, actually, not just UAD, work on, and I wish I had their director here could explain this a lot better than I can, but it are people who are going into this fields where it's landscape architecture, environmental remediation, things like that. But she had a group of students who were willing to do this. Now, this was just amazing for us because a report like this, to be able to take to the powers that be, it cost anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000, which we as a nonprofit did not have, and with the developer didn't necessarily want to spend that money either. But University of Delaware was able to do this for no cost. And I actually thought, okay, well, you get what you pay for, but it's better than nothing, having not seen their work. Well, I was quite surprised, and I'll get to that. But we needed to bring in, during this process, we needed to bring in the community. What did the community want to see in this park? Of course, bring in Delaware Greenways and East Coast Greenways, because we're the missing link up here for East Coast Greenways. And they were an incredible resource tying this into to their plans. We took the concept before we even had the plan done just to let our governor know what we're thinking, and also our county executive, thinking it might be a hybrid effort. So so when I worked with the students and the administrators for with University of Delaware, and this is the one page of the plan, the map of the plan that they came up with. And remind you, they needed to work with the developer's current land design. They couldn't lop off anything or make any major changes to what the developer's map, all this residential here, gave them. So this by no means is going to be the final result, but it's a really good start. So you can, just to give you a bearing here, this is the train tracks. This is the rest of the development. This is our new train station, which I'll be getting to, and this is our existing train station. So we're looking at a couple trailheads. One of the major trailheads being the existing train station that will be abandoned in early 2023 when the new train station opens. So we have a trailhead here, and then there's other entrances to get to it here. The new train station will have pedestrian access to get in here. Here is the marina. So let me go along a little farther. Okay, getting there. This is great. There's so many intermodal options to get to this new park. Of course, walking, biking, driving. Our bus service, DART, the Route 1 bus is the most traveled, most utilized bus line in the state that goes from Rodney Square up Market Street and Philadelphia Pike, and then sort of makes a loop and goes back. But it is, it would go to this site like it does the previous station. The train station, people will be able to access this park coming from Philly and points south, and from Newark and points up. And of course, we're successful with the marina by boat. Now, if we had an airstrip, I think we'd cover everything for transportation issues. So,
sorry to interrupt, Brett, but you have
yes.
about 1 or 2 minutes left.
Got you. All right, here's the new train station currently being built. In there, getting access underneath the train tracks are tunnels for passenger and vehicle. Lots of amenities, an amphitheater, pavilions, lots of trails. This is really neat. A boardwalk. This would be one section, a boardwalk going across. Fitness, of course, a park. And then the marina, I am really excited about that. And here's the Delaware Greenways thing. We're sort of the missing link up here along the road. So we could take it off the road a little bit, and we're working on another connector here to get away from the road too. Here is my email address if anybody has any questions, and I'll put it in the chat too. And thank you.
Thanks so much, Brett, and sorry to rush you at the end there. It was really great to see all the components of the proposed project. And for anyone who's interested, I will also share the project plans. I think I put them in the chat, and we can send them out afterwards as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker, Frank Mclaughlin. And Frank, I really hope I get your title correct because it's long, but Frank is one of our Urban Waters partners. He's also the manager of the Community Collaborative Initiative at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection's Office of Brownfield and Community Revitalization, doing a lot of great work in Camden. So take it away, Frank.
Thank you so much, Erica. And thanks to our attendees for your time listening to our seminar today. And thanks to my other speakers and the MC, Roberto Brugioni from HUD, who works in the New Jersey HUD field office. And I'll introduce an exciting plan in a moment in my talk. First, my name is Frank Mclaughlin. As Erica mentioned, I work for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. I've been here 33 years and have been doing brownfield and redevelopment and community revitalization work for almost 20 years now, and much of it in Camden, New Jersey. Of the many things that we do with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, working in distressed communities is one of our most important things because they have huge, disproportionate amount of environmental stressors and public health stressors, and those environmental stressors hamper social, economic development potential in our cities. And with our Urban Waters Federal Partnership, we work with 4 cities: Philadelphia, Camden, as I'm going to talk about, Wilmington, and Chester. And my work in New Jersey is focused on distressed communities like Camden, New Jersey. Well, it's tough to attract economic development, build new housing, create parks, improve your schools when you have some chronic environmental issues like flooding. Camden, New Jersey has one of the oldest sewer systems in the country. It's a combined sewer system, and it has not been well maintained for several generations until the last 10 to 15 years. And when I started working in Camden in the early aughts, these are the type of pictures that I would see. And I mean, flooding is a nuisance to everyone, but this is combined sewage flooding. So this is mixed floodwaters and sewage. And Camden is both susceptible to stormwater or fluvial flooding, we would call that at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, and also tidal flooding from storms and vulnerability to sea level rise. So of course, Camden is at the bottom of a watershed and at a tidal portion of the Delaware River. In my early work in Camden, despite all the other air quality, land, and brownfields issues, many neighborhoods ranked flooding as their #1 quality of life issue. So we started working on flooding issues in the aughts because of the community priority for flooding. So this is a regional picture of the city of Camden. Across the river, immediately on the left side, is Philadelphia. This is the 100-year flood superimposed on the city map, and you can see much of Camden is also vulnerable to tidal flooding as well as fluvial flooding that I mentioned earlier. We know that sea level is rising in the range of 2 to 3 inches per decade now in this area of New Jersey, and will unfortunately look to accelerate in the next few years. Next slide. Well, I've got control of that. Sorry, Erica. So unfortunately, I only have a few moments to share with you some really amazing projects we've done throughout the city of Camden. And in particular, I'm going to focus on the Cramer Hill neighborhood. I am not going to be able to get to all these projects, but we have done a lot of land, water investments at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, a lot of water infrastructure investments, and some upcoming housing investments that we'll talk about in this presentation. The first, one of the largest investments we've done in Camden occurred in this Cramer Hill neighborhood, which is in the northeast side of the city of Camden. This is the the former Harrison Avenue landfill, an 86-acre city dump, the largest the largest contaminated site in the city of Camden, and also the largest single site with waterfront access along two rivers, the Delaware River and the Cooper River. Camden has about 6 miles of beautiful water frontage along the Delaware River, much of it inaccessible to communities and residents like Cramer Hill until we started working on some projects 10, 15 years ago. So this former 86-acre municipal solid waste dump is now the beautiful Kroc Community Center, serving over 8,000 area residents with, has a medical clinic, food pantry, spiritual, serves spiritual needs. It has daycare, adult care, child care, after school programs, world-class recreational facilities, a black box theater, indoor water park, indoor Olympic swimming pool. All these things were missing in Camden prior to this. So this is a story of how environmental investments of over $30 million for the Kroc Center brought in social and economic gains and jobs to this Cramer Hill neighborhood. And you can see the skyline of Philadelphia. The Cooper River is in the foreground. To the right is the back channel of the Delaware River. And you can see this dump was immediately across the street from the Cramer Hill neighborhood. So an environmental justice of an 86-acre mountain of garbage dumped in the midst of this community, which also extended, and the garbage went into the two river systems as well. Phase 2 of this landfill reclamation is the Cramer Hill Waterfront Park, and you can see many features that have resilient components, restructured shorelines, stormwater management, permeable caps. So starting with the Kroc Center and going to Cramer Hill Waterfront Park on the same former landfill, this was the first large site where stormwater was sustainably managed in Cramer Hill. So the Kroc Center did not put its sewage or put its stormwater into the combined sewage system. It's a separate stormwater management system on site, just like Cramer Hill Waterfront Park. So these were investments not only in land reclamation, but also in managing the chronic stormwater flooding that was occurring in this neighborhood. This is a picture of Cramer Hill Waterfront Park before and after shoreline stabilization techniques. So with rising sea level, we are going to have to do more projects like this that stabilize the shoreline, vegetate the intertidal zone, that can actually properly planted and managed intertidal systems and living shorelines can actually adapt to sea level rise. My boss's boss's boss at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, Governor Phil Murphy, opened the park in November 30th, and there's a view of the skyline of Philadelphia from the landfill, much different than a 50-foot high mountain of garbage when I started working on that site in 2003. Projects like Cramer Hill Waterfront Park and the Kroc Community Center can only happen with a strong and diverse set of partners. In 2011, a unique initiative called the Camden Smart Initiative was developed with some core partners: New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, the City of Camden, a nonprofit, Cooper's Ferry Partnership, what is now Camden Community Partnership, New Jersey Tree Foundation, Rutgers, and the Camden County Municipal Utility Authority. I don't have time to talk about all the successes with the Camden Smart Initiative, but it's a nationally recognized, successful, community-based green infrastructure initiative. In 2013, another collaborative partnership was formed called the Camden Collaborative Initiative with some of the same partners, including the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And we work on additional environmental challenges in Camden so we can prepare for economic development, housing, and revitalization of our community. We have a number of tools looking at climate change and resiliency options. This is one of our partners, the Trust for Public Land, who we work with to look at future health impacts and climate impacts in the city of Camden. And this is showing some maps regarding stormwater priorities, heat island priorities, current equity issues, poverty, and other things where we want to focus our environmental investments. So again, we have a number of collaborative partnerships looking at a range of environmental issues that impact the social conditions and economic conditions on the ground. And of course, resiliency is key for our future development, including housing development. Really quickly, this is another resiliency project we're doing. This is a living resilient shoreline in front of the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority plant. It's the third largest wastewater treatment plant in the state. And we learned from Superstorm Sandy in 2012 that storm surges can knock out critical infrastructure like wastewater treatment plants. And our northern New Jersey communities, New York City lost wastewater treatment for months after Superstorm Sandy. And we are trying to prepare and adapt to future climate change by not only having solar panels, a biogas facility on this wastewater treatment plant, but also a living resilient shoreline in front of it. Here are some components of that. I don't have time to go into specific project details, but I'm happy to answer questions during this webinar, or I provide my email address for future questions. Some concluding thoughts. It really does take a diverse partnership with housing experts, economic experts, poverty experts, environmental experts to work together to address these complex environmental, social, and economic challenges we have in our cities. Investments in the environment that my agency does also supports these other initiatives: housing, economic, health. While we have done a lot of environmental investments, Camden is now ready for significant housing and economic development. And we're seeing this in the city. And hopefully we'll be able to talk about a $35 million housing project that was announced by HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge in June of 2011. And this Cramer Hill neighborhood is looking forward to this huge housing investment that our friends at Housing and Urban Development are leading going forward, which will also include resiliency investments from the New Jersey DEP and other federal agencies. I'm going to leave it there because of time, but these are my children overlooked on the Cramer Hill Waterfront Park, and this is what it's all about: is really reconnecting people to the environment, but also supporting housing and other economic development needs and revitalization in our distressed communities. So thank you for your time. My email address is there, and I'm happy to answer questions later in the webinar or via email. And thank you for your attention and time.
Thank you very, very much, Frank. As Frank mentioned, I just want to emphasize all of the urban areas in the lower Delaware River, because of that historical industry, have really experienced a disconnect and a lot of economic and displacement hardships. So the work that Camden has been doing and such a like community approach, such a environmental resilient approach is really great. So I encourage everyone to ask our speakers questions after the webinar today or put them in the Q&A. So now for our final speaker, moving further up the Delaware River, we are going to talk about a project in Southwest Philadelphia. So I'll turn it over to Bart Wilson, who's a geologist with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Let me start my screen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about John Hines National Wildlife Refuge today. So we've been really focusing on a lot of restoration at this refuge, as it is America's first urban refuge. Here's some nice pictures of after a lot of the hard work that has been done at this refuge, what it looks like. So I'm going to kind of talk about some of the habitat restoration, then the community connections that the refuge has been building and we're hoping to expand upon. So this is the refuge. It's roughly over 1,000 acres. It's sandwiched basically between I-95 to the southern extent, and you have the Philadelphia International Airport just to kind of the north of it. And it is on Darby Creek, and it is actually the largest tract of tidal fresh water in the whole Delaware Estuary. So it's a very interesting opportunity where it is sandwiched between a lot of communities, but it's still very natural and wild. And, you know, some of those educational opportunities are one of the biggest things the refuge has been working on and really having a lot of success with. You know, they really, you know, their programs are, you know, threefold, you know, educate, engage, and connect. So, and a lot of that is getting out into the schools, working on mentorship programs, getting people out to the refuge, volunteer opportunities, which is pretty amazing. And they have a huge staff that does amazing work. And one of the big things that they also try to promote is really kind of accessibility to these environments that people maybe normally wouldn't have that exposure to. And that's, you know, fishing, kayaking, and we're right there on Darby Creek. So there's a huge opportunity for that. And, you know, some of it is also that idea of getting the kids out in the marsh, playing in the mud, learning about different aspects of it. You know, obviously cleanup is a great way to help build connections and help foster that connection to the environment that maybe some people have not really seen this area in that light. And one of the big things that we also like to highlight is there's, because it is one of the largest stretches of freshwater habitat, there are a lot of species that it helps support, especially a lot of at-risk species, a lot of different mussels, especially, and then, you know, frogs. And one of the big things we're really trying to promote more is access to fish, because again, this is an area for, you know, access for American shad, hickory shad, certain sturgeon species utilize these waterways. So how can we restore those habitats for these species? But with this area, as it is a juxtaposition of the wild environment with this urban interface, we have a lot of challenges, and the communities around us have these challenges. And as Frank had mentioned before, flooding is a big thing. So these are pictures from Eastwick, which is just immediately adjacent to the refuge. And this is a common occurrence in these areas where, you know, it's not only tidal flooding, but it's also rainwater, failing septic and stormwater systems create these challenges around the refuge and for the refuge. You know, and again, on the refuge, this is what we see during those same, you know, flooding events where you have water pouring everywhere, and all the low points are collection points for this water. So this kind of creates a big issue for us when we think about everything from invasive species, you know, trash, and then you start putting flooding and climate change on top of this. Sometimes it can almost seem like an insurmountable issue of, you know, you really have limited areas to work in and limited opportunities. So how do you kind of find points or areas where you can kind of make some of these resilient investments in infrastructure? So, you know, and part of that for us is, you know, how do we keep promoting things like wild rice here on the left and pickerel weed where we have egrets, and then, you know, and then trying to maintain opportunities for art and different installations. Like in the bottom right, this was an art installation using Phragmites. How do we kind of help facilitate keeping some of those programs going when, there's a threat to a lot of these natural habitats? So one of the things I want to kind of really focus on is some of the restoration we're doing. And these are, for example, this is the Refuge, this main big green area. And there's 4 main projects ongoing now. And a lot of that, we're also having, infrastructure for, visitor services promotion. And some of that is kayak launches, fishing platforms. But there's 2 project locations I want to really center on. So the first one is to the left here. This is the Henderson Marsh, or we call the Athos area. So this is a restoration project we're going to be going to construction, hopefully this fall. So this is an area that's going to be funded by the Athos 1 oil spill, which was in 2004, just out in the Delaware River. And this is an area where we're trying to restore the natural hydrology of this area that was formerly impounded or cut off from natural tidal water. So this is kind of what it's going to look like, where top right corner is the existing hydrology now. It's really broken up. So what tides do come into this basin don't move through the basin very well. There's not really good access for fish or for people trying to kayak in it. So we're going to be dredging new channels throughout the whole basin to create that better access and flow of water through the system for fish, but also providing these opportunities for kayaking that normally wouldn't be there. And also part of this, there's a trail that goes around the whole basin, and we're looking to install an observation tower, a new bridge to really kind of enhance those opportunities. But this is kind of fundamentally where we're at with the Refuge, of how do we kind of restore the habitat for not only ecosystem services, but for the surrounding public to really be able to enjoy and become immersive in them. And so one of the problems we do have is that, when we look, usually the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we do a lot of work on our land, and we really focus on the needs of the resources on our land. And I think in the past, we haven't done a good job of looking at kind of the neighboring communities or neighboring areas around our refuges and look at how our restorations could help, ameliorate or kind of resolve some of the problems that we see around there. And I think we really had a good lesson in this during Hurricane Sandy and some of the restoration that occurred after that, especially Prime Hook National Wildlife Refuge, where we did projects to kind of do marsh enhancement, but also it really alleviated a lot of flooding in areas. And I think that is key to kind of what we're looking at. So right adjacent to the Eastwick community, we have this large impoundment that we're looking to do a restoration project on. And it's a 145 acre impoundment existing. And one of the things in here, this is a map that Lamar Gore, the refuge manager at the Refuge, and myself and a couple of his staff, this is basically what we sat and did, and kind of sketched out one day to try to figure out, how do we kind of get a project going? And this is sometimes what it looks like. It almost looks cartoonish, but it has to start somewhere. And, so we have this impoundment that we want to return back to native tidal freshwater marsh, and add approximately about 100 acres of freshwater marsh to the area. So that would create, we would be looking to create new breaches in some of the dikes to create natural tidal connection. We'd be also looking to raise some of the dikes around this area so we could still facilitate trails. But one of the big things that we really want to do is look at the community flooding in Eastwick and how we could integrate our restoration into maybe helping alleviate some of that flooding. And so this is kind of a new direction for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So, this is that area I'm talking about. So on the bottom left-hand corner is that impoundment, and it's blue, it's very low elevation. And this is the community of Eastwick. And this box right in the middle, that's kind of the heart of Eastwick. And you can see that's the lowest elevation. So it's basically acts like a bowl. So when we have flooding events, the water collects there. And so one of the things we want to look at is how can we start looking at a lot of the, look at what data that's been collected, but also what other projects are out there that could help inform us to what direction we could go. And for me, that was simple. I'm sure most people are familiar with the South Wilmington Wetland Project. This was an area of South Wilmington, Southbridge, where a similar thing, chronic flooding, a septic and sewer systems that were broken. And this was decades and decades of flooding and sewage that would pile up in basements and in the streets. And one of the things that was done to ameliorate this was taking old brownfield sites just to the west of the community and create a large wetland that would help intercept a lot of the floodwaters. And then at low tides, there would be tide gates that would release it out to the Christina River. And I think this really set a good standard for us because it also had these great intersections of providing benefits to the community where, there was a footbridge that goes through the middle of the wetland and actually gives this community the first access to a supermarket that they've ever had that's actually now in walking distance. So this really sets a good standard. And at the heart of this was the a special area management plan, the South Wilmington neighborhood plan that was developed by the state of Delaware that really went out to the community and figured out what needs to be done and what's a good way to kind of build something that the community will help, with the issues that they have, but also kind of really listen to the voices of that community. And so there's been a lot of work that has been done in Eastwick already. There was a public land strategy back in 2019, and a lot of that integrated a lot of things that the community wanted to see. And obviously part of that is, heal the community and kind of obviously alleviate a lot of the flooding, but also, build community ties, sustainable access to and nurture our youth. And so this is where the Refuge feels like it could really kind of help with a couple different aspects of kind of creating a better connection to the community, especially for people who want to get out in nature, but also really look at how can we kind of tackle some of the flooding issues. So a lot of in that report, this area, a lot of different things have already been done, looking at, stormwater inlets, looking at that. And one of the big things is all the stormwater flows basically out of the east side of the community down to Mingo Creek, and there's a pumping station there. So all the tidal waters and floodwaters that come in have to go out one area, and that's an undersized area to kind of pump out this water. So we need to start looking at multiple ways to kind of resolve that flooding. So, and again, as was kind of mentioned, it's not only just, rainwater, but it's this coastal flooding, coastal storm surge that kind of comes up Darby Creek and around. So one of the things that, when you start thinking about anything that we're going to be doing, we have to think about resiliency in that. So long-term resiliency with sea level rise. And one of the aspects I find really fascinating is that a lot of the sea level rise impacts to this area, there is some in Darby Creek, but a lot of it's going to be coming out of that Mingo Creek area where all this floodwater is supposed to be going. So you're going to have less ability to kind of move floodwaters out that way over time. So again, looking at alternative strategies to do that. And I think one of the big things we thought about was the historic alignment of a lot of the system through Eastwick comes through this open area that's just basically overgrown, empty lot existing right now. And the existing plan has an idea to enhance, do some smaller wetlands, some trails that connect to John Hines. One of the things we want to do is think a little bit bigger. So, we're about to do this restoration and the impoundment. How can we kind of take that restoration and leverage that to look at a larger scale restoration project? So looking at this open lot and thinking about almost taking that model of South Wilmington and turning this into an area where stormwater could be actually diverted and moved through the Refuge to kind of really alleviate some of that flooding. So this is where, the Refuge right now, we are actively approaching, trying to allocate funding for this project, and not just the piece that's on the Refuge. We want to look at the bigger piece. So that's getting funding to look at, designing our area to restoring the natural hydrology. We also start looking at creating a hydrodynamic model for this whole area to look at how we could move more of that floodwater through this area, and then actively engaging a lot of the partners in the area to kind of start leveraging our funding and design with the larger picture of start looking at, there's going to have to be upgrades to infrastructure, stormwater systems to help divert water into this area. But also it's those other components. As we build a larger wetland there, how do we make sure we're creating these connections to the neighborhood? And that's, not only trails, opportunities to enjoy nature, but also kind of how do we integrate our programming better to kind of really serve that community and really listen to the voice of those communities of what they really want. So for us, this is we're just at the beginning of this project, but and I have to give a lot of credit to Lamar Gore, the Refuge manager, John Hines, and his staff, who really, when I approached them to think about, hey, can we really make this a little bit bigger, and he was all on board. He's been thinking about this for a long time. So, my role is to really come in and kind of help figure out how we can get this project done on the ground. And as I said, for the refuge system, this is not normally our model. Our model is usually to kind of work on refuge land and think about how we partner and bring in the partners and meet somewhere in the middle. But I think that's where, John Hines is a unique opportunity for us to really start reaching into the community, not just in the great educational programs we already do, but in our restoration. How do we actually use the refuge as a conduit to start really ameliorating a lot of the flooding? Well, that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Bart. And this type of work and reaching into the community, making sure that our restoration projects are also serving them and their needs is exactly what we're trying to replicate within the watershed. So thank you so much for sharing. I think we have time for maybe one question, so I'll turn it over to Roberto for a Q&A.
And great presentations, guys, by the way. So I know we have limited time, but this question is for Brett, and it goes along one of the questions that went into the Q&A, and it's really so it looks like you've been able to work with a number of partners who have either donated land, like the developer, or government partners. What's been the key for your organization's ability to be able to work with those different groups, and how important has that been?
Well, I think I realized a long time ago with revitalization, when you don't, especially when you don't have any, and I hate to use this term sugar daddies, but a wealthy donor, whether that be a corporation or heck, even a interested politician, and all those pieces fall together to throw money at a project. You have to be able to get, I hate, this is such a bad term, it has a bad connotation, but bureaucrats on your side. And that is one thing that we've successfully done, because we all know that bureaucrats run government, okay? Elected officials come and go, bureaucrats stay. And we just, getting to know the folks at DENREC, which is our, I'm sure everybody here knows what DENREC is, our environmental agency, our DOT, DELDOT, also with our metropolitan planning organization, WilMAPCO. That is absolute key, and having their backing can get just a lot of stuff done. And of course, elected officials, bringing them on board, and community, everybody. Literally, it is everybody. Did I miss part of that question? I got off on a ramble.
No, I didn't. No, I think that's perfect.
Right.
I'm gonna sneak it. I hope Eric does not mind. Yeah, I'm gonna sneak in just one more quick one, and this is to Frank, because I think something that Brett mentioned is true, right? I mean, you've seen this for a long time. You've been doing this work for a long time. What's your suggestion or advice to groups that are looking to undergo these projects, and maybe having the patience that sometimes it does take a while and stay motivated? Can you kind of give some advice on that end?
Thanks, Roberto. And advice, I mean, have a plan, right? And make sure that a lot of people and all constituents' voices are heard in that plan, right? Without a plan, and without a diverse plan with a lot of input, you're not going to get support from everybody. I remember I was part of a planning effort in North Camden that asked that plan to have Riverfront State Prison out of Camden. They never wanted it in the first place. They put it on a plan and went to Governor Corzine in New Jersey, and Governor Corzine agreed to it and provided $6 million to remove a jail on the riverfront in North Camden. I was part of a team that proposed to former Commissioner Bob Martin in the Christie administration the Cramer Hill Waterfront Park. We had a plan, we had a cost estimate, we had done over 10 years of community engagement on that landfill. Well, Governor Christie and Commissioner Martin at the time in 2016 said, we're going to put natural resource damages settlement monies, $48 million to do a 62-acre park with a mile of river frontage, 2 rivers. And so having a diverse partnership to develop a plan and then seek funding and expertise to implement the plan. So that's a long answer, Roberto. And, you know, I work for an environmental agency, but Roberto and his team at the New Jersey HUD field office is doing a $35 million, 400+ unit redevelopment in Cramer Hill because of the environmental investments. And of course, we work with HUD in other neighborhoods in Camden, including North Camden and Whitman Park. So again, if you're looking to do housing, you have to prepare the environment for that housing and have to build it for build in resiliency for the future. So work with a lot of good people at all levels of government, the private sector, of course, the nonprofit sector, of course, and local residents, most importantly, because the sites and the conditions are in their neighborhoods and they have a lot of history and a lot of ideas about what has happened and what is possible in that neighborhood. So sorry for the long answer, Roberto. But it's a passion of mine working with organizations like you, Partnership Delaware Estuary. We've worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Haven't worked with Brett in Claymont, Delaware, but I'm hoping for an invite down there at some point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto, for the question.
All right, so I'll turn it over to Erica to wrap it up.
Thanks so much. And sorry we did not get to answer everyone's questions, but I will be following up via email with all the resources from today, the recording, the slides, and I'm sure our presenters would be happy to answer questions via email as well. Thank you so much again to Brett, Bart, and Frank for presenting today. It's great to see all kind of levels of people working on these types of projects in the Delaware River in our urban waters location. And we have another webinar next week, Tuesday from 12 to 1, where some other federal agencies will be talking about different resources that they have to help this work keep moving forward. So I look forward to seeing you then. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Have a great week.
Thank you.